Assalamu alaikum everyone. It is Asma Afzal. Hope you're all good. The topic that we're going to discuss today is Sylvia Plath as a confessional poet. In the previous lecture, we discussed the major features and key elements of confessional poetry. And in this lecture, we will discuss Sylvia Plath as a confessional poet. We will explore her poetry and find out the confessional traits in her poetry. But before going into that, we would discuss briefly the introduction and the life history of Sylvia Plath so that we can know her better, and only then we will be able to explore the confessional elements in her poetry. So let us get started. Sylvia Plath was an American poet, a novelist, and a short story writer, but we know her majorly for her poetry. She was born in October 1932 and died on 11th February 1963. And her father name was Otto Plath. He was an entomologist, and entomology is a scientific study of insects. He was basically a professor of biology at Boston University, and he authored a book named Bumblebees. What is important over here is that he had a very deep impact on the psyche, upon the life of Sylvia Plath, which actually reflected in her poetry also. He died right after Plath's 8th birthday, like a week or 10 days after her birthday. And she was quite young at that time period, and she had a very deep impact of her father's death on her life, and this is also reflected in her poetry. Her mother name was Aurelia Scover. Sylvia Plath married to Ted Hughes in 1956, who was also Ted Hughes is also an American poet, a very famous one, and is known for a number of works. They had two children, Frida Hughes and Nicholas Hughes. What is most important about Sylvia Plath is her preoccupation, her obsession with suicide. She she attempted suicide like a number of times. Her first um, clinically acknowledged attempt was in 1953 when she took a huge number of sleeping pills of her mother, and then she closed herself in the cellar so that nobody can approach her and save her. But however, she was saved with luck. Her second suicide attempt, was in 1962, and the third and the final attempt was in 1963, which resulted basically because of the bad impact of the relationship, because of the ending of her marriage with Ted Hughes. That marriage was not a successful marriage, and she had to suffer a lot because of that. And that is very deeply and clearly depicted in her works also. The way she committed the suicide is also very terrifying, very terrific, and very heart wrenching, where she actually closed herself into the kitchen, and then she put her head into the stove and opened the gas, and she died because of the overdosage of that gas. This was quite a planned suicide. She made sure that her children are safe. She closed them into the other room, and then she sealed that room with wet towels so that the gas could not leak into their room and affect them. And then she wrote a note and gave it to her next door neighbor, and she committed suicide just a few moments before the nurse had to come to look after the children. So she made sure that there would be somebody who would come for her children, that her death, her attempt shouldn't affect the children actually. She is buried in Haptonal Stall Church, England. If we look at her writing career, we find out that she started writing at a very early age, like some 7 8 years, at the age of 7 8 years. The pen name that she used was Victoria Lucas, but after some time she actually started writing with her own name. Her first published work is was published in the Boston Traveler, and the most notable works that we know her for are The Bell Jar, which is a semi-autobiographical novel, and Ariel, which is her most important, most renowned collection of poems. She was an extraordinary person with a very high IQ, and she was very intelligent, and she was very good at studies also. She earned Fulbright scholarship, which is one of the um, notable and very renowned scholarships around the globe till today. And then she also won Glasgow Prize in 1955 and Pulitzer Prize for her poetry. This prize was basically given to her posthumously because her collection of the poems was published after her death by Ted Hughes. So, since our topic is about Sylvia Plath as a confessional poet, all these things, all this information was important because we wanted to know Sylvia Plath in a better way, so that we can explore those confessional traits in her poetry. Uh, if you remember, I told her that confessional poetry was basically a reaction to the depersonalized theory of poetry, which is about a lack of self in the poetry, where T.S. Eliot said that poetry is about an escape from emotions, not actually turning loose of emotions. So, confessional poetry was a reaction to this theory of depersonalization in poetry, because confessional poets thought that it is basically poetry must be a representation of personal life. It was about breaking taboos, about the topics that were not discussed previously. Those topics were being explored in poetry. In confessional poetry, the topics like anxiety, depression, lust, suicide, psychological breakdowns, tortures, all these topics were something that were not being discussed in poetry, were not made the subject matter for poetry, because they were considered to be too personal for poetry, because poetry was not considered to be a platform where the personal experiences, personal sufferings, and issues must be discussed. So, confessional poets basically took a U-turn, and they actually presented a reaction to that prior knowledge. So, if we talk about Sylvia Plath as a confessional poet, we find out that she acknowledges this fact that she is a confessional poet. Among confessional poets, we know that Robert Lowell was first one among those, and Sylvia Plath had a very deep impact of Robert Lowell upon her life and upon her poetry. She herself says that I think my poems immediately come out of the sensuous and emotional experiences I have. But I must say, I cannot sympathize with these cries from the heart that are informed by nothing except a needle or a knife or whatever it is. So we say that she openly acknowledges this fact that her poetry, her poems come out of her own personal emotional experiences. It is not something that does not belong to her. Then she also says that I think that personal experience is very important, but certainly it shouldn't be a kind of shut box and a mirror looking narcissistic experience. I believe it should be relevant, and relevant to the larger things, the bigger things such as Hiroshima or Dasha and so on. So basically, what she wants to say is that fine, the personal experiences are very important, and as far as confessional poetry is concerned, they take personal experiences, personal issues, and sufferings very seriously. But those personal experiences, those sufferings, those issues should not be presented as something naive or something very subjective. they must be given a grander or a bigger meaning. They must be related to bigger things in the world. They must be presented in an objective manner. So that is also one of the key features of Plath's confessional poetry. If we look about the confessional traits in Plath's poem, let us discuss a few poems from your syllabus. I would be discussing only those poems and exploring the confessional traits in those poems so that you can better understand because you've read those poems. So first of all, the poem that we'll discuss is Arrival of the Bee Box. If we look at this particular poem, Arrival of the Bee Box, we find out that it is quite subjective in nature as far as the meanings and as far as its thematic concerns are thought of. If even if we look at the bee box itself, the bee box, it appears to be like a box, like a prison for the emotions of the female emotions, the struggles, the problems that the female face in man dominated, male dominated society, in a patriarchal society. We find out how they strive to be free and to enjoy their own lives, to have a life of their own. It is just like those bees which are like imprisoned in that box, and they are making a huge noise and they are in a huge anger and they want to be set free so that they can explore their life and they can basically express themselves in a better way. So this particular poem, if we look at it in a general way, this reflects Sylvia Plath's feminist thoughts and her struggle to make this world a lot easier for the female community. Let us explore Arrival of the Bee Box in a more deeper way. She says, I have to live with it overnight. I cannot keep away from it. Earlier she says that she has ordered this bee box. So we've seen that confessional poetry deals with I as a narrative, as a narrator. So you see that here she is using I have to live with it. It is quite a personal experience, sort of a personal experience. And she says that I have to live with it overnight and I cannot keep away from it, that she has to bear what she has ordered, what she has planned. She has to bear it now. She has to bear the consequences. And then she says, I wonder how hungry they are. I wonder if they would forget me if I just undid the locks and stood back and turned into a tree. So again, she is putting herself into that experience, and she says that if she frees those bees, what would they do to her? What would their reaction be? Would they actually attack her and seek their revenge from her, or would they forgive her and forget her and make themselves busy with their own lives? Here, one thing is very important. Her obsession with the bees, the topic, the bees she took for, could be taken back to her father. She was attached to her father, and she knew that her father was professor of entomology, and he had quite good research with the bees. He even wrote a book about bumblebees. So this thing with this obsession with the bees, she took it from her father, which is quite a subjective thing. Then she says, I am no source of honey. I am no source of honey. She's talking about herself, and she says that those bees must be seeking food, and for them food is something that helps them in making honey. That is their ultimate purpose. So she thinks that she is not a source of honey. It is very important also. And then she says, tomorrow I will be sweet God, I will set them free. Tomorrow I will be sweet God. She wants to be helpful. She wants to express her love for them and her care for them, and she wants to set them free. But tomorrow she will be the sweet god. Right now, because she is in power, in authority, so she wants to explore that authority and she wants to execute that power for a little while. Then the second poem, the bee meeting, again the topic bee, that is important. She says, I am nude as a chicken neck. Does nobody love me? This line is very symbolic of Sylvia Plath's life. She, throughout her life, craved for love. She thought that nobody loves her, that nobody cares for her, that nobody is actually there for her. And this was the question that actually haunted her, that does nobody love me? So right there in the poem, she expresses that fear of her. Then she says, now I am milkweed silk, the bees will not notice. They will not smell my fear, my fear, my fear. Thrice, my fear, the word my fear is used thrice, which puts a huge emphasis upon her fear. So we see that here again she is talking about herself, her fears. She does not want to be not loved, unloved, or something like that. And all those fears and all those concerns that she has been hiding from others, she is very much concerned whether others, the bees here in this case, will notice her. Then she says, I cannot run. I'm rooted. I cannot run. I'm rooted. This reflects her life. She wants to run from her life. She does not want to keep living the life that she is living right now. She wants to get rid of that monotonous sort of life where she is bound by that marriage and children. And I have already told you that she was not happy with that marriage because it was like hindering her writing career. And for her, writing was something that she lived for. The only thing that kept her going was her writing. It was like a catharsis to her. It was her ambition, her aim, her profession, everything. For her, everything was her writing. But after marriage and after children, she was so preoccupied with that domestic sort of life, with taking care of the children and looking after them, that she could not actually get time and energy to keep her writing with the right pace. However, she noticed that Ted Hughes was quite flourishing at that particular time. He was attending different conferences and different writing seminars, and he was presenting his new works, and he was traveling, and he was living the life that she actually aspired for herself. Fine, he was her husband, and she would not have minded it if she was also living the life that she wanted to. But right now, all the responsibility of the children were put on her shoulder. She was the one who was domesticated. She could not explore her writing career the way she wanted to. So she was rooted. She could not run, but she wanted to run. Then she says, I cannot run without having to run forever. I cannot run from this monotonous life, from this domesticated life, without having to run forever. And this phrase, having to run forever, actually reflects to her suicide obsession. She knew that as long as she keeps living, she wouldn't be able to get rid of these responsibilities. So these sufferings, these tortures, this depression, anxiety, they will be haunting her. And the only way out that she found and that she could imagine of was suicide. Then she says, whose is that long white box in the groove? What have they accomplished? Why am I cold? So at the end, when the bee queen is actually killed and she sees her, she actually finds herself in that. If you read the poem, The Bee Meeting, it actually reflects her own life, how she feels that the people are gathering to actually hunt her down. And it was the time period when Ted Hughes was found cheating on her, and she knew that he was involved in somebody else, and he was basically cheating upon her. So, in the B meeting, she is talking about that particular instance where the previous queen bee is being hunted and a new one is ready to take her place. So it is also reflecting her fear that she has herself talked of. And when she sees that queen bee, the dead body of that queen bee, she thinks as if it is like her own dead body. That is why she says that, why am I cold? Coldness basically reflects death. It is related with death. Okay. So she herself being cold reflects that she herself felt that she has also died with that queen bee, because it was also something that was happening in her own life. So you see, all these things are quite personal, quite subjective in nature, but they are not presented in a subjective manner. They are presented in a very objective manner. The thing that she talked of, that these particular subjective experiences, personal experiences, shouldn't be presented as a mirror reflection. They should be related with bigger things in life. Okay. So the next poem is Morning Song, and there we see another aspect of life where we see a mother and a child's relationship. And she says that I am no more your mother than the cloud that distills a mirror. So basically, the relationship between the mother and the child, and she is talking to her child, and she is saying that I am your mother just like a cloud. I find my reflection in you, and you are just like a mirror copy of myself. And then she says that I one cry and I stumble from bed. This reflects a typical mother and child's relationship, where the mother has such a deep concern for her child that even when she is asleep, she stumbles from her bed and she reaches for the child upon one call only, and she's always there for the child. She wants to be there and she wants to help the child in all the possible ways. So you can actually read the Morning Song and you'll find a lot of other examples also. Then Ariel, one of the very important poems of Sylvia Plath, where she actually talks about growth, about metamorphosis, a change which actually was brought about in her life. She says how one we grow. If we go back into Ariel, and we find out that it is a poem where she actually talks about horse riding journey, where she actually felt that she and Ariel, the horse, her horse, became one because of that journey. And then she says, and now I, foam to wheat, a glitter of seeds, that I have turned from foam to wheat. Foam is something shallow, something which is not that precious, that beneficial, but wheat is something very important, right? So it talks about the metamorphosis, the change that actually that ride actually brought to her. So if we look at that ride, it is not only that horse ride, the journey. It is a journey of life. It is a journey where she turned into a better person. It is a journey where she, after having a lot of experiences, turned into another person. And most of the times it is related with her experience of childbirth, that after the birth of her children, she turned into a new person, and she could explore herself in a different way. Okay, so that particular, that turmoil, that terrific and that painful journey of the horse riding on the Ariel basically also reflects to the experience of childbirth. And then the third example, I am the arrow, that basically is directed towards sun, the cauldron of light, where she would be presenting herself in a better way, and where she would be understanding life in a better way. And since it is about metamorphosis, it is about turning into something else, it is about a new experience, it can be far-fetchedly also related with her obsession with suicide. So this was all about Sylvia Plath's poetry and all those confessional elements in her poetry. I hope you understood it, and it would be quite helpful for you. If there are any queries, you are confused about anything, or you have any sort of questions, you can ask me. You're more than welcome anytime. So take care of yourself, stay safe, and stay connected. We'll meet in the next lecture. Thank you so much.